As the United States continues to attempt the extradition of WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange from the UK, The Intercept is focusing on the controversial past of a key member in the U.S. government's case. Federal prosecutor Gordon Kromberg. Kromberg's verbatim assertions on Assange's harms to the U.S. national security have been used in various court filings, including this quote: "Well over 100 people were placed at risk from Assange's disclosures, and approximately 50 people sought and received assistance from the U.S." End quote. The Intercept reports that Kromberg has been, quote, "dogged by accusations of bias and politicization in his prosecutions."
Joining us now to discuss is the author of the piece and national security reporter at The Intercept, Murtaza Hussain. Welcome, Maz.
Thanks for having me.
So can you talk a little bit about who Gordon Kromberg is and how it is that a single individual prosecutor involved in a case can have such an outsized effect on how it's waged?
So Gordon Kromberg was probably one of the most notorious prosecutors of the post 9/11 era in the U.S. He was involved in some particularly egregious terrorism prosecutions, prosecutions many deemed malicious thereafter, or involved allegations of torture and other abuses. And Mr. Kromberg was actually cited very heavily in the extradition hearings in Mr. Assange's case earlier this year. And in these hearings, foreign courts tend to rely on the statements of U.S. prosecutors as to why the extradition should be justified or what the allegations substantiate the extradition. And this hearing and these filings relied very, very heavily on declarations, a set of declarations from Mr. Kromberg about what Julian Assange did, how he did it, and what the implications were. And they really relied on his statements as basically evidence to substantiate why he should be extradited. Now, and I don't expect that anyone in the UK would really understand who Mr. Kromberg is or how he fits in politically in the US political landscape. But for those who followed his cases and followed the national security trials of the post 9/11 era, he is a particularly notable figure for his efforts, his involvement in abusive cases or even allegations of stretching or bending the truth to get prosecutions.
So just looking at your story, there's a lot of concerning elements to it of, Kromberg's past and what he's been doing. Yet he continues to hold, what you call a high position in the U.S. Justice Department. How do you think he's managed to survive, multiple administrations at this point?
So, there have been other stories in the past about Mr. Kromberg, not recently, but maybe a decade or so ago when these cases were at the higher level of public attention. And he really has become a lightning rod or, famous or infamous within the DOJ amongst the public for the things he's said and done in his prior cases. It's hard to speculate about why he's still kept around and he's still being, in fact, used in very politically important cases such as Mr. Assange's case. My assumption is that he's somebody who's willing to be a lightning rod. He's willing to make outlandish claims or statements or be a source of controversy in the pursuit of getting convictions in cases that the DOJ considers politically important. Now, Mr. Assange's case is probably one of the most politically important cases in the world for the future of press freedom because of the involvement in the Espionage Act. So the use of Mr. Kromberg at a high level suggests that the DOJ is highly motivated in getting Mr. Assange in the U.S. and getting conviction on these charges.
And we talked earlier about one of Kromberg's claims that he had that Assange had put more than 100 people at risk through his disclosures. What is the reality behind that claim?
It's still highly disputed that these disclosures were they were large disclosures which had very complex implications. A lot of them, they were used for very positive purposes. There was a lot of intelligence which was raw, which was released as well too. It's difficult to say. The important thing, however, is that we cannot treat this as a statement of fact or a claim which has been proven, especially in a foreign court. We're making a decision based on Mr. Assange's extradition. And if we're doing so, we need to substantiate these allegations and to have it put forward the greatest possible confidence. Just an assertion to a foreign court by a prosecutor without providing substantiating evidence at the time does not inspire confidence or does not substantiate these allegations to a level we should take to the point of extraditing him to the U.S.
So it seems that, Assange's case has become or reemerged into the spotlight anyway as sort of a cause célèbre among, many advocates of press freedom. At the end of the Trump administration, there was a big effort, fairly bipartisan, to get Trump to pardon him. He obviously did not. Do you get a sense that, despite the Biden administration pushing forward with this extradition, prosecution, that is any way going to change at all? Are they being responsive to sort of the change in tone?
So far, not. The administration has continued to push forward with the extradition. They seem motivated to get Mr. Assange in the U.S. I think, however, though, that, during the past 4 years, obviously, there was a lot of controversy around the 2016 election. There was a lot of political polarization around Mr. Assange's case. And, it became an issue of domestic politics in the U.S. I think that the more important issue, and the most important issue in this case, is not about Mr. Assange himself per se. It's about the implications of what they're trying to do to him, which is they're trying to prosecute him for things that journalists do all the time, which is receiving classified information and publishing it. And the thing that it should be the biggest issue for national security journalists in the U.S. because this is an attempt to lay a groundwork for criminalizing national security journalism in the future. Now, regardless of which administration is in power today or which administration is in power 4 to 8 years from now, if Mr. Assange is brought to the U.S., put on trial and convicted on espionage charges for the acts that he is alleged to have committed in this charges against him, we'll have created a groundwork to charge any journalist who runs afoul of any administration, whatever its political leaning, in the years to come. So I think that the time is ripe, really, for this to become looked at soberly, the actual allegations against him, and outside of the partisan political implications of what he did in 2016 or years later.
So the extradition case took a huge blow recently when a key witness in Iceland, Siggi Þórðarson, said publicly that he had been kind of pressured to lie, essentially, and retracted a significant number of claims that were in a superseding indictment. Based on what you know about Kromberg's role in the prosecution, does that fit with the pattern that you have uncovered of his prosecutorial behavior in the past?
I saw that report in the Icelandic press, and if that is further substantiated, that would be a very significant turning point and probably undermine even more the U.S. efforts to extradite Mr. Assange. I would say with regard to Mr. Kromberg's background, the two things that really characterize his track record are a very, very, relentless to the point of even malice pursuit of targets that he dislikes, to get them on trial, to pursue them with more and more charges, to exert pressure upon them. And secondly, strong ideological motivations in his prosecutions. In many ways, he was motivated by, it seemed to be almost personal animus in some cases towards the people he's involved in. It's hard to say that what sentiments he has to Mr. Assange in this case, but what I can say is that he would definitely pursue him with a great relentlessness based on his track record, which maybe outruns the actual evidence against him or outruns the meritworthiness of the charges. If there's somebody in the DOJ who would do that, probably Mr. Kromberg would be at the top of the list.
Well, Murtaza Hussain, terrific reporting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be back soon with more Rising.